Love is supposed to be sacred, a promise to stand together through every storm, every trial, every fleeting moment of happiness. But what happens when that promise becomes nothing more than a mask, hiding betrayal, lies, and the darkest of desires? Behind the doors of what seemed like a perfect marriage, a chilling truth began to take shape. A man, once seen as a loving husband, found his heart consumed not by loyalty, but by forbidden passion. And that passion demanded a price. In the shadows of his double life, temptation whispered louder than vows, and lust spoke louder than love. The woman who had once been his everything, his partner, his confidant, his wife, was slowly turned into nothing more than an obstacle. An obstacle that had to be removed. And so, the stage was set for an unthinkable betrayal. A husband's vow of forever, twisted into a plan of death. The question is, how far can a man go for love or for lust? At first glance, their marriage looked flawless. They were the couple everyone admired, smiling at gatherings, holding hands at church, sharing meals with family, as if nothing could ever break them apart. Neighbors would whisper, "They are the perfect pair." But behind those carefully painted smiles, cracks were spreading like poison through glass. The wife still believed in their vows. She trusted him, even when he came home late with vague excuses, even when his phone suddenly became a secret he never left unattended. She cooked his favorite meals, ironed his shirts, kissed him goodnight. She believed love could heal whatever was slowly changing in him. But for the husband, the warmth of home had grown cold. His heart had already crossed a dangerous line. Another woman, his mistress, had planted herself deep inside his mind. She made him feel alive, reckless, desired. With her, he wasn't just a husband bound by responsibilities, he was a man free of consequence. And soon, he began to see his wife not as a partner, but as a chain shackling him to a life he no longer wanted. It started with lies. Small ones at first, "I had to work late," then bigger ones, "I'm traveling for business." Each lie was a brick in the wall he was building between them. And she, blinded by love, helped him lay those bricks without even realizing it. But love is not blind forever. She began to notice the perfume on his shirt that wasn't hers, the sudden anger when she asked simple questions, the way he flinched at her touch, as if her hands burned him. Doubt crept in, whispering the truth she didn't want to face. The man she loved was slipping away. And for him, the thought of losing his mistress was unbearable. Divorce meant shame, scandal, financial ruin. His reputation would shatter, but murder promised silence. Murder promised freedom. So in the dead of night, while his wife still clung to the hope of saving their marriage, he was already planning her end. The night began like any. He watched her from the hallway, his face hidden in the shadows. In his hand, he clutched the weapon he had chosen, a heavy object, simple, ordinary, but lethal when used with intent. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with anticipation. Tonight would be the night. Tonight, he will. She turned, smiling gently. "You're still awake?" Her voice was soft, Inuk. He stepped closer. She noticed the change in his expression. The warmth in his eyes had turned into something unrecognizable, something hollow, dangerous. Fear crept into her chest. She set the cup of tea down slowly. "What's wrong?" she whispered. But before she could move, before she could scream, he struck. The sound echoed through the house like a violent storm. The teacup shattered against the floor, fragments scattering across the tiles, as if the walls themselves recoiled from the act. She fell, gasping for breath, confusion and betrayal painted across her face. "Why?" That single word slipped from her lips, soaked in pain. He couldn't answer. He didn't want to. In that moment, he was no longer a husband, no longer a man. He was a monster, driven by lust and selfishness. He struck again, silencing the woman who had once trusted him with her whole heart. The house grew eerily still. No humming, no footsteps, no warmth, only the heavy sound of his breathing and the dripping of spilled tea mixing with blood. He looked down at her lifeless body, and for the first time, the reality of what he had done clawed at him. The silence was suffocating, but he forced himself to focus. He couldn't falter now. He dragged her body across the cold floor, his hands trembling, leaving streaks of red behind. Every creak of the wooden boards felt like an accusation. Every shadow seemed to whisper her name. He wrapped her in a blanket, one she had knitted years ago, a cruel irony. Then, under the cover of night, he carried her out. The neighbors would think nothing of it. Just a husband moving something late at night. No one would suspect the horror hidden within the folds of fabric. Outside, the air was cold, almost biting, but he barely felt it. His mind was consumed with the next step: disposal, alibi, freedom. The mistress was waiting, after all. Waiting for him to rid himself of the burden he had sworn to love until death. And now, death had come. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't yet see, was that murder never guarantees freedom. The blood on his hands would never wash away. The lies would unravel. The whispers would grow louder. And the ghost of the woman he betrayed would haunt him in ways he could never escape. For 2 days, the house remained silent. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, the world outside continued as usual, unaware of the darkness hiding within. But silence cannot last forever. Neighbors began to notice the wife's absence. She was the kind of woman who waved from the garden, who greeted people with kindness, and now gone, without a trace. The police arrived after a missing person report was filed. At first, the husband wore the mask of grief. His eyes watered on command. His voice trembled as he spoke of his beloved wife. But beneath the performance, his heart raced with fear. Would they believe him? Would his story hold? Detectives walked through the house, their eyes scanning every corner. The kitchen floor bore faint stains, hastily scrubbed, but not invisible. One of them bent down, brushing a finger over a darkened groove in the tile. "Strange," he muttered. The husband's chest tightened. They asked questions, ordinary at first, but sharper with every round. Where was he that night? Why hadn't anyone seen her leave? His answers came rehearsed, yet cracks appeared. Lies are heavy, and under pressure, they start to collapse. The turning point came when they examined his car. Beneath the trunk liner, faint traces of blood were found. DNA confirmed the truth, it was hers. The walls of deceit he had built came crashing down. When the police returned with handcuffs, he tried to protest, to shout, to claim innocence. But the evidence spoke louder than his words. The mistress, once a source of temptation, vanished from the picture, unwilling to face the storm. He was alone, abandoned, shackled by the very crime he thought would set him free. The trial was swift but merciless. The courtroom filled with whispers, gasps, and cold stares. The wife's family sat in the front row, their faces pale with grief and rage. Her sister sobbed as prosecutors described the brutality of the crime. Each detail painted him not as a husband, not as a man, but as a predator who betrayed love itself. His defense tried to spin stories: momentary rage, loss of control, even blame on the victim. But the jury saw through it all. They saw the premeditation, the coldness, the selfishness. They saw a man who valued desire over loyalty, lust over life. When the verdict came guilty of murder, the room erupted. Some wept, some sighed in relief. Justice, though delayed, had spoken. The judge's sentence sealed his fate. Life behind bars, with no chance of freedom. As the guards led him away, his eyes darted across the courtroom. He expected to see the mistress, perhaps a trace of comfort, but she was not there. He had killed for her, and yet, in the end, he had no one. The silence of abandonment was his new companion. In his cell, nights stretched endlessly. Every creak of the iron bars, every echo in the corridor carried her voice, his wife's final whisper. Why? He could not escape it. The blanket he had used to cover her body haunted him in his dreams. The kitchen tiles, the shattered teacup, the look in her eyes all returned, again and again, like a punishment far worse than prison. The story spread across the town, then the country. Newspapers carried the headline, "Husband murders wife for mistress, justice delivered." People shook their heads in disgust. Parents warned their children about betrayal, and neighbors placed flowers outside the wife's home as a quiet tribute. The tragedy became a lesson carved into memory. Love, when poisoned by greed and desire, can turn into the sharpest weapon of all. And in the end, no one escapes the weight of justice, not even those who once believed they could kill for freedom. In the end, the story of this marriage is not just about one man's crime. It is about the darkness that can grow quietly inside a home, hidden behind smiles and wedding photos. A husband who once vowed to protect became the executioner of his own promise. For what? A fleeting desire, a temporary passion, a mistress who abandoned him the moment consequences arrived. The true victim was not only the woman who lost her life, but also the sacred trust of marriage itself. Love, meant to be a shield, became a weapon. Trust, once unshakable, was shattered into pieces that can never be repaired. As the prison gates closed behind him, he faced a truth heavier than any sentence: that freedom gained through murder is no freedom at all. It is eternal imprisonment of the soul. So we must ask ourselves, as the gavel fell and silence filled the courtroom, was this really love twisted by desire, or simply the cruelest betrayal a human heart can commit? By Donna. And somewhere, beyond the bars, the memory of his wife's smile lingers forever, reminding us that behind every perfect marriage, shadows may lie waiting.